Our first speaker this afternoon will be Bob Taylor. Bob is in partnership with his father on some cotton acreage in Arizona. Now Bob's taken on a real challenge here. He doesn't particularly like to have a farm in one place, so he spreads it from Scottsdale to the Colorado River. So he gets to run back and forth across the western mid-central part of the state. He's got himself a real challenge. He is on the board of directors, the Supima Association and the Chandler Ginning Association. He has approximately 4,700 acres in organic cotton right now, and a total of 10 to 20,000 acres they look at on a mixed farm situation. With that, I'm going to let Bob just provide you with his experience.
Good afternoon. 15, 20 minutes is going to be hard to raise a cotton crop, but we'll go through what Taylor Ag Industries does. We've been growing organic cotton for color organic cotton for Sally Fox for about 3 years now. Started with 80 acres and went to 1,000, and then this year really expanded our acreage. Main reason, of course, was price incentive, but in our back of our minds, what we were doing conventionally was not working well. We were having a multitude of problems. We were adding manures, and our yields were still dropping, and we weren't getting the kind of production we felt like we needed, so we started looking for an alternate source of management. And we settled on organic because we felt like that due to the nature of the amount of pesticides and commercial fertilizers that are being used, that we were going to have to eventually find an alternate source to be able to survive the cotton industry. You have to bear with me on my notes here a little bit, only I can read them. We started off our program with pretty much conventional methods. Started with plowing to try to, well, really we start with a cover crop and or compost, and then we use a plow to try to bury the weed seeds as much as possible. And then we go in after our conventional ground preparation, we go in with a lister, and as we form our beds, we add humate mixed with feather meal. And we found that the specific placement of the humate does a lot better for Taylor farms. We place it right under the seeds because there's no phytotoxicity at all to the root zone. We like it split. What we usually do is put half on at bedding time and half on at planting time. We find out that works best for us. When we get ready to plant, we prepare our beds with a cotton mulcher, but then as we plant, we do not use any herbicide whatsoever. And we found out with no herbicide that we can cut our whole bill even in spite of the lack of herbicide by using guided cultivators, and they've been a real blessing to us in the organic business. We found out with no herbicides that we get a different fruiting structure on our plant. We find out that we get an earlier fruit set and more fruiting sites, and a larger root mass was also involved with no herbicides. Our soil in our area is pretty light, and it tends to move with water. The root mass is larger, and we've noticed in our watering schedule that our watering schedule has lengthened out, and we get a better response. Lots of times in the past when our cotton was small, when we'd water, we'd get no response, and I suspect that we were getting such root pruning from the amount of herbicides we used that we're not getting water response. Incidentally, we've noticed about a 15 to 20% water reduction cost. We prefer to side dress the cotton with the organic fertilizers, usually using a feather meal. We found out that those fertilizers are so much less water soluble that we don't get any movement, and so we get total usage out of our fertilizer. And in turn, it's such a balanced fertilizer mixed with the humates and the microbial activity that we get a plant that tends to grow slower and put on more early fruit set and develop bolls better. And that's our whole chance to win against the whitefly situation we have in Arizona. It's a real problem there, and so we have to have earliness. That's our own. And not only that, we usually get less canopy. We get a smaller, more compact plant with as much fruit, and by doing that, we don't provide the canopy that the whitefly likes to inhabit. Also, we feel like by using the organic fertilizers, our nitrate levels are lower, and in turn we get less amino acid production. And we feel like that amino acid is the food source for the whitefly, and that tends to build him. If you use a commercial fertilizer and you get those high nitrate levels in your plant, the whitefly is much more prone to attack those plants. I wanted to tell a little story about one of the problems area we found when we started large acreages of organic was the field man. Luckily, I had a field man furnished that's an employee of Color Organic of Visalia Fox, Mike Lindsay, who's an excellent entomologist and excellent field man, and he gave me a lot of input that I couldn't get from my regular field consultants. They tend to want to remedy the situation overnight, and with farming organically, your management is intensified, so you have to have a little patience along with that, and field men tend to want to cure the problem the next morning and go on about their work, and they're not willing to come back. We raised the price per acre on all our field men this year, so that we felt like instead of 2 days a week, we could get them in the fields 3 days a week, which is, in my opinion, barely adequate for organic cotton. You need to be in those fields. Tell a little story about this year. We had a very wet spring in Arizona, and we had an influx of armyworms early, and our natural predators hadn't built to a point where they could handle what was coming in from the desert. So we had to apply a BT for armyworm control, and it wasn't on the total acreage, but it was on about a third of the acreage. After applying it with a ground rig, banding it on using a minimal amount, we only had about 85% control. The first response I got from my PCA was, well, we only got 85%. I said, wonderful, that's great, that's perfect. He rolled his eyes back and he said, well, we want them all. I said, well, if we don't leave a food source out there for our predators, we're never going to build predators to control anything. If we wipe out all their food source, well, then they're going to leave the fields, and then we'll have bollworm and all the rest of the pests along with it. So they have to think differently than what the current thinking is on pesticide control. After arriving at a stand of cotton, and we farm it pretty much conventionally, but we found out with the herbicides that with no herbicides, before we water every other row, our watering pattern is every other row. We water one row and skip a row. And we've noticed in the past that when we'd get water availability, we'd try to water the other row to bring up the weeds and get germination. And what was happening is we were shutting our plant down. We had pushed that herbicide past the plant, and then when we put the water back on the other side, we pushed it right back. The poor plant got it from both sides. So now we find out that with no herbicides, that's another increased yield factor there by not burning off those feeder roots twice in 1 year. So we see lots better water response, and in turn make an earlier crop and get out quicker. We've reduced our season this year approximately 2 to 3 weeks on our organic crops. And in some areas, we have some difficulties yet. We're still battling with late season weed control. When you have a more compact, heavily loaded plant, you don't have the shading effect as well, and so you do have some late season weeds that we're going to have to look at with either later cultivation. We're just going to have to address that. And we did have some lagus on the tail end of the season that presented a problem. But these are things that you learn to work with, and I think earliness is probably going to be one of them. The earlier that we can get out of that crop, the better off we all are for all sakes. We had excellent use out of the pheromones for pink bollworm control. They were excellent. In fact, even on our conventional cotton, we've gone to the pheromones versus the organophosphates to control pink bollworm. We've had excellent results by maintaining the predator counts. Defoliation is probably one of the major problems with organic cotton. I found out that by managing nitrates and nitrogen, that it's not, the cotton will naturally go into senescence and cutout will take effect, and you'll see less problems with with defoliation on a plant that's completely used up its nitrates. So that means that to do a good job, you have to get in early with most of your fertilizer program has to go in very, very early. I think the opportunities in organic cotton are great, as I see that as we go into this thing, the tremendous use of commercial fertilizers and water pollution problems and pesticides, that we can learn to produce a crop using less of these inputs and producing just as good a quality crop. We feel like that most times we make a comparable yield. In some instances, we haven't learned to manage our land as well. But if we can build the soil microbes and balance that soil to a healthy soil, we have healthier plants, we have less problem with pests, and we find out that the cover crops tend to even things up and have helped our whole total farming package. And I think there's a distinct opportunity here with cotton, its current high usage in the United States, that we can make this awareness that these products are produced environmentally correct and that they are something that should be sought after by the consumer. So I think that does it for me.
Thank you very much, Bob. You're actually bringing us under schedule here, so that's maybe leaves more time for others. But one of the things I do want to sort of emphasize that he mentioned was the importance of recognizing the agroecosystem, especially when involved at the pest management, the linkage not only to the predator-prey ratios, et cetera, the lack of quick fixes, but allowing things to take its own course, but also understanding of the production system and such that the pest management isn't a separate item from the overall crop production. Our next speaker will be, I'm not sure who's going to be speaking, Claudia or Linda?
We're both going to speak.
Both of them are going to be. The Shepherds, Claudia and Linda, will be speaking next. They farm in Chowchilla area here in not far from Visalia here, and a little bit north in the San Joaquin Valley, running about 800 acres of organic cotton. They've been growing cotton pesticide-free now for 6 years and are on 2 years into their transitional system right now. Can we start, Linda? Thank you.
Well, kind of. Get up here. In case you can't make the distinction, I'm Linda, and I'm going to, first of all, start off by just giving you a little bit of background on Shepherd Farms and on Claude and I. When we were married, I didn't have any kind of agricultural background, and Claude, of course, is a fifth-generation farmer, and the land that we live on right now has been owned by 3 of those generations. And Claude's grandfather farmed most of his life, and his father did as well. You know, Claude and I used to laugh a lot when we were first married, and he would be out in the fields working all day with his grandpa, and you have to understand, his grandpa was in his 70s, and he would come home and he'd say, you know, he'd be telling me what he said, and his grandpa would tell him, well, son, while we're resting here, let's just pull these weeds out of the corn. And I used to, you know, I think all those things that ancestors tell you, they stick in your mind, and I think that's why Claude learned so much from farming, from his grandfather and from his father as well. In 1978, Claude and I sort of took over the family farm, and we started farming on our own, and up until about 6 years ago, we probably didn't use every chemical on the market, but we used our fair share of them. And I think where the distinction was between us, a lot of people own a farm, but sometimes they don't really live on that farm. And not only do we own the farm, but we lived right in the middle of it. And you know, there would be days that I'd hear the planes fly over, and I'd wonder, you know, what new chemical are they spraying, and what are the effects going to be on my family, and you have to understand, sustainable agriculture and organic anything, those words really weren't anything that we understood. I mean, we were not involved in anything to do with organics, and we just decided that we were tired of being sprayed with pesticides. I was tired of seeing Claude come in sick from work, and a lot of times he would be sick physically because, and generally it would be during planting time because of all the chemicals that we were using. And we were expecting our 5th child, and I, you know how mothers are, they get really protective. And I started really, wondering what all these effects, if they were really affecting him, how would they be affecting the unborn child and the other 4 as well. And so we really made a decision. We sit down and we talked about it, and we decided that in the small place that we occupied, that we were going to really use or try to use less chemicals. So for us, that meant that we were going to stop using pesticides, and we're going to just try to cut back on everything. And basically we did. We stopped using herbicides as well, and the only thing that we were really using was like a defoliant, maybe sodium chloride or something like that, and I thought we were doing just really good. And I think that's why it was so important last year when I came to the first Transitional Cotton Conference, and I came here with a lot of expectations and maybe a lot of unanswered questions. And I sat and I listened, and the conference, people got up and spoke, and they talked about soil fertility, and they talked about water management, and they talked about pest control. And the whole time I was thinking, yeah, I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that too. And then finally it was time for somebody to talk about something that I was so excited about, and that was the big D word, which was defoliant. And I was so shocked when whoever was supposed to speak got up and said, hey, guess what? There isn't one. And I'm going, hey, wait a minute. This pamphlet says right here somebody's going to talk about defoliant. And, I was getting kind of a little bit upset about it because, we'd gone through the whole thing. We'd gone through no pesticide, no herbicide, and we were really looking for a way to grow cotton without a defoliant. And we don't have the benefits that the Texas score was talking about. We don't have early frost. And so it was a scary venture for us, and especially for me. I even heard some farmers talking after the meeting was over, and they were saying, maybe we can get us some old rust pickers, and we can pick our cotton with that. And I thought, man, this is 1992. We've got all this modern machinery, and they want us to go back and use the methods that our grandfathers used. Well, little did I know, but some of that, I guess, really has come to pass. Anyway, so on the way home that night, I told Claude, I said, I think we better just stick with what we know. I think we'll continue to grow cotton as organically as we can, and we won't use pesticides, and we won't use herbicides, but we'll still use a defoliant. And he said, well, maybe we'll just put a small acreage in. So, being a man of his word, when it came ground preparation time, we put 660 acres in, and I lived in fear, trust me. I tried to, in my mind, think about all of the, I tried to think about all the people that went before us, like the pioneers, and, how that they blazed a trail with wagons through all kinds of perils just to make a better life. But somehow that thought didn't console me too much. The only thing I could think about was, how's it going to be when we get to a point where we can't do this or we can't do that? And I guess I was thinking about, alternatives like that you would have in conventional growing. Like if you have a problem, a pest problem, it's pretty easy to reach in your pocket and pull out a recommendation for comite or capture or something else that will solve your problem, depending on what your problem is. It's a lot harder to reach in there and pull out a lacewing, trust me. We went through so much problems with trying to, be sure of what we were doing. And we weren't sure what we were doing because we didn't know what we were doing. And that makes it hard for you when you're out there, you're just running wild. And for me, it was a real scary time. So what I'm thinking in this whole thing is, why are we doing this? Money really wasn't an issue at first. I'm really happy. I don't want to say that I'm not happy that there is not a premium price in growing organic cotton. But money was not the issue because we didn't even know there was such a thing as organic cotton. We just knew that we were tired of the planes flying over. We were tired of being exposed to different chemicals, and different people around us had contacted different kinds of cancer because of chemicals. And right now we live in probably a 5-mile radius where we have 3 different landlords, and each one of them have a different kind of cancer. And I know that all this is really debatable, and we have no idea exactly what causes all those problems. I'm sorry, dear, I'm running on here. But, you know, there's got to be some kind of connection. And for me, you know, in farming, I don't want to just make a living. I really want to make a difference. And I want my children to breathe air that's clean. And I want them to inherit land that is not contaminated with chemicals and not sterile. And I don't know how many of you read this article that was in Farmer to Farmer. And right now I don't know if any of the staff is here, but I want to take a few minutes to thank them for writing this article on us, and especially Susie Benson. She really did a great job. And you know, if you read this, you probably thought, wow, you know, I guess you can win the lottery after all, or or you thought, well, I guess if you kiss enough toads, sometimes they do turn into a prince. But you know, if you read between the lines here, it's really hard to tell how many toads you have to kiss. I mean, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of problems in organic farming, and we came up against a lot of them this year. If you mention organics to a lot of people, especially bankers or finance people, it's just, you're kidding, you know. We can't possibly give you any money to grow any cotton if you're not going to spray it with something. And that was just one of the problems that we came up against. There's been a lot of problems. And really what I'm trying to say is, organic farming is, and I know I haven't told you any practices here. Maybe it's because I don't know any of them. It's hard, you know. It's a hard situation to make. It's a hard decision to make, to really say, well, hey, I'm going to quit everything. I'm not going to use defoliants. I'm not going to use herbicides. I'm not going to use anything. And if you're going to see, I think I have some slides, and I put them in at dawn, and some of them were upside down, and they probably are, but still yet. But I wanted to show you some pictures of what our cotton looked like when we picked it. The only thing that bothered me was the color that you see here. The only thing that I'm used to seeing that color at picking time is actually the color of the machine. The cotton was so green, I was scared to death. I mean, you know, we've never picked cotton that was that green before, and that was our first year, and I was amazed that a cotton picker could even pick cotton that green. I mean, I watched it go through the field, and I thought, oh my God, what kind of grades are we going to have, and are we even going to be able to pay for the harvest? I mean, it was just a scary thought. Anyway, I'm going to let my husband say a few words here, because I know that I'm probably rattling on taking his time. And then maybe when he gets through, if we have a few minutes, we'll show you some of these slides.
Well, my wife, she got me up here with her. I couldn't believe this, but she wanted me to, she says, I want to present something. I want you to stand by me. Well, that's what I did. I stood by her. But on the farming practice of it, you have to farm your way through this thing. I mean, it's not something that you can just walk out there and feel like that you can do it in the same practice as you do conventionally, because you can't do it. It's altogether a different type of farming. First of all, your cultivating practices is going to change right from the start. Otherwise, if it doesn't, you're not going to be able to hold these fields and be able to come out on the bottom line showing a profit. Your cultivating is one of the main issues in organic farming, my feeling is. And I know that a lot of people like Lilliston cultivators. I like them myself, but you're going to have to switch over, I feel, to a different type of cultivator. And I switched over to an Alway. And the Alway goes down into the ground and it busts off these rhizomes on this Johnson grass. It also goes underneath the grasses like your Bermuda grass, and it goes down and works on the root system. Otherwise, your Lilliston cultivator, all it does is run on top and just pricks the ground. It doesn't go in there and tear up anything that's established down below the dirt line. You're going to have to get down in there 8 or 9 inches and bust this stuff up. I know that you're tearing up a lot of cotton roots, and you're looking back at it and you're saying, God, I don't know about this. But I mean, your main practice is you're going to have to hold down the hoeing bill, because if you don't, the extra money that you're going to get will all be going for chopping. And believe me, we all want this to work as far as not being able to use pesticides. We don't want to use any herbicides or anything like that. We'd like to have a Clean Air Act, but you're definitely going to have to work at it. You can't just say, well, I'm going to go out there and grow this organically and it happens, because it doesn't. You have to work at it. As far as the insects in the fields, you're going to, instead of walking them, I know a lot of people, you can talk to them and they'll say, well, I walk my fields twice a week or once a week. If you're going to organically, you better be on a rotation program on your fields that you can watch them very closely. I feel like you ought to walk each field at least 4 times a week, because you're talking about a turnaround. Once you notice you have a problem, you're on a 10-day turnaround to 2 weeks before you can tell that you've even slowed the situation down. This is not a 72-hour turnaround. You can't go on there and spray it. You're going to fight this problem with insects. You're going to turn out certain types of insects for different problems. And I don't care which one you turn out there, you're looking at a 10-day to a 2-week turnaround. So don't wait until you just drive along the fields and you see that you have a certain problem and expect to turn it right around, because it won't work. At the same time, you have to learn the levels that you want to use in your predators. If you throw out too many at one time, you're going to clean that area up real fast, but your bugs are going to leave. You're not going to have bugs there laying eggs that'll hatch off at different times. So don't go in there and over-treat the area. You have to learn the process for it to work. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. I mean, you can't just say, yeah, I'll go out there and I'll throw out all these bugs, and this here is going to take care of my situation. You'll have another flare-up, because you got to have them so that they're just there. They're available for that particular problem. And they'll stay in your fields because that's their source of eating. I mean, they're going to follow the problem around. You're always going to have some type of problem all the time. You're going to watch it, but the thing of it is, you don't allow it to get away from you. But you don't want to clean it completely up, because if you do, then your bugs are going to leave. I mean, it's just that simple. And then that area will come back and be a problem later on. The aphid situation is one of the worst ones. Red spiders, you can take care of them real easy. You can take care of ligas too. I know a lot of people say ligas is the hardest one to take care of. It's not the hardest one to take care of. The hardest one we have to take care of is aphids. And aphids, when they come in, you just keep on putting out bugs in those areas where they come up. Don't put them in the whole field, because if you put them in the whole field, the first thing you're going to do is clean up the whole thing and they're going to leave on you. Fight the areas where you have them. Just keep on putting bugs in those areas. And at the same time, the balance will work over the rest of the field, because the other bugs, they're taking care of the problem because you haven't had no breakouts there. Don't get excited and say, I got to treat the whole field. You get into a lot of expense doing that, and at the same time, it's not going to work, because they're going to leave on you once they clean it up. At the same time, one benefit about using the predators on the aphids, I know a lot of people say, well, what if you get sticky cotton over it? Well, in some of these areas that the stuff builds up and it drips off the leaf, this honeydew, as it drips off, if once you take care of that problem there, your beneficials go back and eat up all that residue that was there, and it won't get on your cotton. So don't get scared when you see an area that you have lost. Just keep on putting bugs in there, but don't just jump in there and throw a whole bunch in there. Keep on and monitor yourself. Know how many you put in those areas. And then the next time when you have a breakout, you'll remember how many it took to take care of the problem. Don't overkill. It's the same way with your pesticides, though. If you overkill in a situation, you have problems too, because then you don't have any beneficials in that area. So it's the same thing. I mean, you know, you have to learn how to work at it. But just always remember, it's not going to happen in 72 hours. When you have a problem, don't wait until it's a nightmare before you start fighting it. And can you grow cotton organically? Yes, I believe very well that you can. Last year, we had 660 acres, and we had no problems with it. This year, I have 800 acres of it. And of course, it's not in the field. I mean, it's not out of the field yet, but growing practices, we have got it there. At the same time, we had an outreach program with the farmers in our area, and we have had 5,000 acres brought into the program. And it will work, because out of these 5,000 acres, we're going to deliver 9,100 bales of cotton, to an individual named Ed Davis this year, which is S&E Farms. And they're well satisfied with the program where we're at. And he feels that it will work. And I feel that it'll work. But the main thing is the buyers of this cotton are going to have to feel that it works at the same time. I mean, they're going to have to be able to present their garments where the public like them. At the same time, the public's going to have to be educated. Why should they buy a garment that's going to cost more than regular cotton? The reason is the Clean Air Act that we're giving them. Their cities are not being sprayed. The country itself is not being sprayed. So if it's not going to be sprayed and you have cleaner air and cleaner water because you're not getting any sprays over the waters, then I feel like the public then would be willing to pay more for it than normal cotton because we are paying more. Our bottom line is to grow it organically, you can't grow it as cheap as you can conventionally because you've got sprays to kill your grasses with, you got herbicides to keep them from coming up, you have defoliants that you can get the cotton killed and you go right in there and pick it. Well, we don't have those. We don't have them at all. I mean, you have to watch your water. Don't water late. Don't keep water on the lower ends of the field. If you have a problem with drainage, don't let the water get down there because if you do, those areas are not going to open up. Because when it comes time for this cotton to die naturally and as you work with it, it's not going to work. Anything that you are eligible to use is not going to work on that part of that field. On water management, it starts from the very first also. This crop cannot be overwatered early. If it is, it's going to get away from you. We have nothing for growth regulators that works real well. We have nothing to work with on that. And what you're going to wind up with is a real tall stalk that you can't do nothing with later in the season. So watch your water early. Later on when the plant itself loads up and you have a lot of fruit, then you can water it more often. But wait until the end of the crop before you start it. But then at the same time, you're going to have to quit a little earlier than you would normally. And the reason is this plant has to go into a stress position so that it will defoliate for you. Otherwise, you're going to have a real problem with it. And I guess I better sit down because with what my wife had to say earlier, we probably already used up all of our time.
Thank you. I guess we're not going to get to see those slides right now, but we might chance later. That reminds me too, Bob has instead of a slideshow, he gets to engage you one-on-one. He's got a photo album of some of the equipment he's using, some of the techniques he's using. Feel free to grab them afterwards and sit down and really kind of go through there. I assume he brought it there to talk about it. Moving a little further east now into that area of the country that produces a little bit of cotton. The high plains of Texas, we have Mark Wilkes. He's a grower in and around the Lubbock area. Has about 3,200 acres of organic cotton. Also grows some mixed crops around there, such as millet and wheat. And has been involved in the organic situation now for about 2.5 years. Mark, if you'd like to take it now and talk about the high plains.
Thank you. It's going to be pretty hard not to duplicate, so I did bring along a slide presentation too, so if you would change those trays and while I'm kind of talking a little bit. I'm just going to kind of catch a couple of things and then go into the slide presentation. Maybe if you've got any questions about the growing, you can ask them after Lorna gets through. I am also the chairman of the Texas Organic Cotton Growers Association, and I would like to extend myself and any help that I can to mills in that fashion. Something else that's unique that come out of the organization is the Japanese have just now founded the Japanese Texas Organic Cotton Growers Association. So we have a group across the seas to work with. All the all the fields under the Texas Organic Cotton Growers Association are certified by the TDA, which in their certification they do a field inspection, a soil and tissue test, and in a couple of times come by your field when you're not there. Also, with all our growers, you can ask for our certification at any time. This year, it looked like we're going to have, of course, Brent, I believe, talked about this a little bit. There's going to be around 15,000 acres of organic cotton, and I expect somewhere around 10,000 bales to come out of that. Now, that's a lot different than probably the Arizona and the California growers when they get 2 bales to the acre. Well, we're just hoping to get 3/4 to half a bale. So our production standards are a lot lower than the Arizona and the Texas growers. I mean, Arizona and the California growers. One of the unique things that come out of my growing on 2 plots of land I have a guy who comes by and inspects them for me and tells me what kind of water and fertilizer I need. The way he checks my field or lets me know what I need to do, he uses a system called Gossam-Comax, and that's developed by Texas A&M to tell you what kind of inputs you need into your growing. Weekly I get a form that comes off his computer system that says, okay, your production now is 200 pounds. At this time of year, you need to start adding water, you need to start doing this or that. Something that he noticed, and he's new into the organics and learning along with me, and the only reason I really got him on is just I can have 2 minds there that can kind of help me with my growing. But on one field in particular, all I had done was listed and planted cotton. And the whole time he was going to headgum, this field's not going to do anything, it's terrible, and so forth and so on. Well, up till about a month and a half ago, the crop on his production level was saying 120 pounds to the acre. Now, he called me right before I come down here, and he said, I think it'll be 1.5 bales. And it still says on the Gossam-Comax computer system, it still says 120 pounds. So a lot of this, I think, is mindset on what it's going to take to raise some of these crops and so forth. I also said there was a second field, and that field I had broken or turned the soil over and had applied about 10 tons of cow manure. That field looks like it's going to make the same or less than the field that I did nothing but use a stale seedbed type of system. So you never, to get a mindset saying that you're going to have to apply some things or that you need conventional type farming practices to do this organic, I'm disproving that as we go along and having a witness watch me as it does it. Another thing that's come up is the chemical companies who are contacting us, and instead of charging, like somebody brought up earlier, a lot more for the chemical, they're giving it to us free just so they can say they've added on some organic farmland and they can have some tests. They've even asked us to we're going to pay our flights out here to California to look at their plants and chemicals. So that has been a added benefit to the growing, is, like I said, some of the free chemicals and inputs that we ordinarily wouldn't have known about, but that have been called into us and told about. Some of our major problems that we have in our area is our first and major, really, I'm going to speak as myself, but is our weeds. Our major control or on the weeds is cultivation and hand weeding. Something I have done even while I was conventionally was always kept my weed pressure to null. I eliminate all weeds. I don't let one survive in the field. That way I never have a major seed problem coming back from the next year. So if I miss a cultivation due to rain, due to just time trying to get across, they don't kill me on cost of weeding them out. Another one is nitrogen. Our soils are very porous. Our clays are pretty deep, and in what clays we do have do not hold that type of nitrogen, especially up in the 1.5 foot levels. If there was any one thing that we would wish we could put out, it would be some 32 or something like that. But I think even applying or wanting some type of nitrogen like that, as counterpart brought out, was when you get those nitrogen levels up, you do have infestations of insects that the aroma or so forth coming from that field is twice as bad, I believe, once you apply a large amount of nitrogen. So you've got a catch-22, wanting the nitrogen or not. Some of our minor problems are defoliation. This year we have some dryland crops. We had no rain, hardly at all, for I'd say an 80-day period, and it almost destroyed our dryland. Well, that dryland is opening up now, and is needing to be harvested or so forth. And we don't really use pickers because our cotton is very short and so forth, and you can't get in there and pull the cotton out. And plus, it is stripper type cotton, where it's tight bowl and your spindles can't pick it out. So we're really limited on when we can go in there and pick or harvest our cotton. Another one is aphids. We have an aphid problem also. I don't think it's as bad as our conventional counterparts who have been using the insecticides. I was able to control an extreme infestation in one field, just completely eliminate it with ladybugs. And it didn't cost me that much. I believe it was about $2 or $3 an acre. But that worked very well. Another problem, I would say, I don't know how many other people have got into this, but is with my landlord, or one landlord in particular, and I've heard other growers have a little bit of trouble with it, is especially the old-timers who used to farm organically before I did. And their thoughts was, you can't do it and don't do it on my land and so forth and so on. It's a problem. And educating them and getting them to believe in you and that you can keep the production pretty close to what it was conventionally, and also give them a premium for investing or believing in your thoughts and growing it organically. Something before I get into the slide show, the Texas Organic Cotton Growers, not as the association, but as a group, have also formed a marketing co-op. The marketing co-op we have formed is better able to fulfill maybe some of the mill's needs and get us quality specific. I think this following year we'll have probably around 8,000 bales that you can pick from and pick your quality out and so forth. But that's just, if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that later. If you would go ahead and turn the slides on, and I'll kind of... this is where I'm located, approximately, and that's probably where I would say 70% of the growers that are growing in Texas are located also. This is some of the rotation used in the cotton. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. That's some sorghum and hay grazer. There's some cotton burrs that's been spread out. This is some interseeding, or this will be plowed up and then cotton or green manure crop, whatever way you want to call it. Same thing. Some manure. There's the spreader. They're putting it out. That's an old, it's kind of what a lot of people want to call them obsolete, but it's water, not the manure, but the water system. There's a system run off of water pressure. We have quite a bit of water there, and we can run the system without electricity, and it's called a circle system. This is some before and after pictures of some weeds, how we kind of cultivated them out. We have also had to switch our cultivation practices to a lot different type of cultivating to be able to move a lot of dirt at a certain time. You can see we run bar and off disc on our farm to kind of get in there pretty close and to hip up the beds. We have a wind problem also that a lot of places don't have, and we have to control our wind. And one of the ways is keeping our beds up pretty high for quite a while the cotton's little. These are some of my helpers. I couldn't bring them with me, so they made me bring them this way. This is an organic cotton field out by my house. Here's some what we call row watering or ditch irrigation. Another circle system, harvest time. As you can tell, our cotton's not quite as tall as y'all's. Here we were using a gang rotary hoe. We had an early freeze and it kind of froze some of the top of the crop, and we used a gang rotary hoe to knock that out, and it kind of helps the grades and leaf trash problem you would have running a stripper. There's a before or side-by-side picture. That's what it looks like without just running it or stripping, harvesting with all the leaves on. There's lots of dried leaves there that get tied up into the lint. There's without it. This is a group of ambassadors from some other countries we had about 2 years ago come out. One of their choices they wanted to look at was organic cotton and colored cotton. They went through here looking at the organic and then headed up to Lubbock to look at some of Sally Fox's colored cotton. But anyway, there was agriculture ambassadors from around the world. Just some of the organic cotton. This is some colored cotton. This will kind of show you what it looks like, white versus this on the right is green cotton. There's a visual difference. It looks kind of nasty and ratty. But especially the green, it's not a very pretty looking crop. This is brown and white. You can kind of see some of the different tints just right there in the row of the different kind of colors just in the colored. It falls out very bad. Fixing to go into this year's crop. This is what happened this year. This is hairy vetch that I had planted as a green manure crop. Did a little experimenting. I'm not sure about it, how I feel about it as of yet. There's a close-up. This is some border planting of alfalfa as a host crop for insects around my field. This is something I've noticed and hadn't really paid attention to. It's where they were putting out the manure this year and the truck didn't turn off and made a loop, so you can kind of see a little more dramatic sides on the napkin. This is a farm I put in this year. Last year, or in January, it was an oil field pasture where just roads going across it going through some oil fields. It wasn't used for anything, but we took the mesquite off, plowed it, and turned it into, since this farm here has had chemicals on it since God put it in. So there's no problems here. Kind of the site the way it looked like before. as we were going and putting it in. One of those is seed, and one of those where we used to put Timic, or it was in systemic insecticide. We now put granulated fertilizer in the back hopper, and we lay it right in with the cottonseed. Kind of some, you can kind of see some of the weeds or the plants coming up out of the pasture. I also use row dicing that stops some of the wind and conserves a lot of the water. You can kind of see it, some chops there in the row. It's kind of the progression. It's kind of about where it's at about right now. It's taken about 2 weeks ago. And that's, I believe, about it for me. Oh, this is a slide of some Japanese who come out that form the Japanese Texas Organic Cotton Growers Association. They're out looking at some of the organic cotton. And all this ends up at one place, a mill. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. We're going to move further east yet to the great state of Tennessee, where Lorna McMahon is going to talk to us about her experiences. She's a fifth-generation family farmer on 2,300 acres of land, president of the Mid-South Organic Cotton Growers Association, and currently has those 2,300 acres in northwest Tennessee. That'll turn it over to you.
Well, I must say that this is a real pleasure to see this many farmers and environmentalists and merchandisers in every arena in cotton kind of together in one place and have kind of the same focus. This has been a real pleasure to come behind these people because I'm not really prepared to talk to you about the nuts and bolts of cotton production, but pretty much the direction that organic cotton's taken right now, and that I think as we as producers and processors need to look at. For a couple of minutes, I'm going to kind of tell you about how I got into this. I am a fifth-generation farmer. The day I was born, my grandparents left this farm to me, and I always knew I would come back to the farm. And you have to keep in mind, my father was 50 years old when I was born, and my youngest cousin is 79 years old. So we have a few years age gap in there. So I was always the little kid, but bore this heavy responsibility of thinking about coming back to the farm. My father passed away be 6 years ago, the end of this month. And he was pretty much a catalyst in kind of the direction that I've gone in. Back in the early 70s, I started seeing a lot of things change in our area, like the wildflowers in the ditch banks and the things along the country roads. And I had a vivid memory of those as a child, but in the early 70s, I started seeing these things that were fond memories to me disappearing. And I kept in the back of my mind, well, how am I going to do it when it's my responsibility? And I got married when I was a sophomore in high school. I have two grown children, one 20, almost 25, and one 21, and a 4-year-old. So, needless to say, I did not go to college and have an agronomy background, and I was constantly going, okay. So, in the early 80s, well, let me back up. In the mid-70s, I had a chemical reaction to food additives. It started being apparent of some things that were affecting me. So this really started triggering it, and I started asking questions about where I might be able to find alternative methods of going into production when my time came. And I found those doors kept being shut in my face. In the early 80s, I did go to college. I made it through all the turmoil of growing up and having children, but I tried to go back to school in the early 80s, and I really was naive to think that everything was going to be right there. Well, little did I know, it just wasn't. The time was just not right. Now, my father was an organic gardener. He produced all of our food for the table organically, and I would look at him and I'd say, well, why don't you do this, on the big farm? I have 2,300 acres. And he'd always put the pressure on me, and he'd say, well, that time change has got to come in your generation. The market's just not ready. That's going to be your responsibility. He really had a real respect for J.I. Rodale. I'm sure that a number of you are familiar with him. And as organic gardening and the Rodale Institute started progressing, he diligently ordered their books and studied, and I'd find him, he had such a conflict. He'd be going out in the morning and loading up the chemicals to go out into the field, but yet at night he'd sit there with his organic gardening books, and I thought, he's struggling, with these decisions. So, he firmly believed that his death would be caused and was caused by cancer, and he firmly believed it was from his exposure to chemicals on the farm. And I think the last 2 months were kind of the hardest, because that's when he really became so peaceful. And he would tell me, you've got to make a change. You've got to go forward, and you've got to find better ways. So, here comes country girl from Tennessee. I'd been gone for probably 10 years, living in the Florida Keys, running a scuba business, and only owned a few bathing suits and some flip-flops with no agronomy background, and coming back to take over this big responsibility. Well, I really felt isolated. I never realized, I was so naive and so enthusiastic. I thought, yeah, all of these people are going to think this is the thing to do. And they'd come forward and, have this big united effort that will make change in our little rural community. Boy, was I badly mistaken. Not only did I come back as a major landowner in a county with 8,000 people, but a woman in agriculture with no agronomy background and then organic tendencies was just a little bit more than the people in our community could grasp all at one time. So I found that a lot of the struggle that they had was just lack of information too. And I had made a decision that this was going to be a lifestyle choice. And so I spent, since the normal channels of finding information were not readily there, I went to Extension, I went to all these places, and they weren't there. So I thought, well, now I've got to talk to farmers. Farmers are the people that I'm going to get what I need. And I've spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours and thousands of miles on the road, and the best information I have gotten has come from other farmers. Farmers are so creative and so innovative, and I think that's what's so unique about this organic movement. Farmers have been out of the driver's seat, seems like, for maybe 30 or 40 years. And with this type of production, it's getting us back into the driver's seat and evaluating our problems and our obstacles. And, you can talk to a turnip farmer someplace, but maybe you don't grow turnips, but you can talk to him and converse with him, and you find one or two or more ideas you can go back onto your farm with. And I find that that's the thing that's been the most thrilling, is to see this thinking process it's just mushrooming and developing, to see farmers that had depended really on recipe books and the bill of goods that they'd been sold as conventional producers to start using some of their own ideas and trying and own farm research. And that's going to be an extremely big key to your success, whether it's cotton production or whatever you choose to do, is you've got to be committed to continuous on-farm research. We need replicated trials, but the real facts and data is going to come from the farms, where the real problems and solutions lie. Now, when I started getting to the realization that it's not going to be easy to make this thing come about. And I was thinking too how private a person I was. I kind of thought about coming back to the farm and burrowing in, and it'd be a comfort zone and everything would be okay. And as I talked to farmers, the more I talked to farmers, the more I found that they needed to talk. And I've kind of developed a place for myself in this movement, let's say, of helping other farmers network and get together and talk about things. And it's real heartwarming. I am 7 years into organic production. We started just prior to my dad's death. And cotton was always a major crop for us in our region, and I was fascinated with it. And I thought, this is the big guy. You know, this is where I'm going to have my troubles. And I've been kind of a glutton for punishment when people say things can't be done, you know, they're impossible. So I have a tendency to butt my head against the wall and prove them wrong. But cotton, I thought, well, it's easy to talk to people maybe about food crops and lettuce and things like that and organic. But if I was going to make a difference, I was going to have to go and find answers about the thing that in our particular region was the most detrimental, and that was all the hazardous inputs that were going into cotton production. And I had made up my mind. At that time, I didn't know that there were other people talking about growing organic cotton. And I was going to grow organic cotton and just sell it to the gin. I just was going to do it. I was going to try it anyway. And the Rodale Institute in ACTRA in Fayetteville started supplying me with information, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say that a wonderful thing happened in that I made an acquaintance with Sally Fox. She's just been so inspiring through this thing. And especially being a woman in agriculture, it kind of gave me a little momentum to keep trying, you know, to go ahead. So we networked and this, that, and the other. But so advocacy type work became an important feature of trying to speak for the people maybe that didn't feel like that they could speak for themselves, or they had too much pressure from their peers to maybe agree on some of these organic topics, but really wanted some help. So now I have a hat rack I carry around with all these different hats and things that I do. I'm the president of our Mid-South Organic Cotton Growers Association. I'm on the board of directors with the Tennessee Land Stewardship Association. I have just been brought on the board of directors for the Rodale Institute, which is probably the proudest thing that I've done so far. I'm involved with the Southern Sustainable Ag Working Group, referred to as the SOG, and on a committee on the National Dialogue for the 95 Farm Bill. We have also adopted an inner city farm called Chelsea Farms in the city of Memphis and become a sister farm to bring urban and rural children together to do educational programs to teach them about farming and environmental issues, and hope that some of the inner city children can visualize a chance to maybe experience a rural life sometime, and if they do not get that opportunity, that they can go back into the inner city and put in food production within the perimeters of the cities. And so this is going to be a real exciting project to be involved in. I feel like our children, you know, it's hard to change us grown-ups from old habits, but I think our children are something that I hear each of us talking about, something that we want to make a difference. We want to be able to pass to our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren this opportunity. And this is the only sane way to go about doing it, is organic production. There is no other way. There's not. As I have met other farmers with the same dilemmas and problems, the positive side is that we're finding answers, and we're finding them at a pace that I feel that we can all keep up with. And one thing I think that was an advantage to me not having an agronomy background, I didn't have any old habits that I had to start rearranging, so that's been kind of a plus. The first thing I did was eliminated my soil testing. I got to looking at the different things that were available to me to analyze what I was doing, and it just didn't make sense. And because maybe I didn't understand it somewhat, I thought, well, I'm going to have to run on pure instinct here, and I've got to get a philosophy about how I want to make this thing work. And so I knew that my soil had to be healthy. And I knew that one of the biggest things that concerned me was watching farmers in our area monocrop, or maybe only have one or two crops, and it concerned me deeply. So my goals are soil building programs, as many cover crops and a diversity as possible, and as many crops as possible. The one negative to organic production, the stress that's gone on, I've gained 40 pounds since I started doing this. But the positive side to it, I have more peace now than I've had in a long, long time, because I know that I see the light at the end of the tunnel now. I want to encourage farmers to just go, when you go home, you've got to set a philosophy about what's going to work for you. But you've got to think about that soil. No matter what you do, your marketing strategies, you know, all of those things, you can't gamble, you know, everything, put all your eggs in one basket. The stress level's reduced a little bit the more diversified that you can get. My major production happens to be in soybean production, and we have 10,000 acres in contract in organic soybeans for the 94 growing season, so that is a big plus, and they do bring a premium on the market. So go home, and you gotta get a philosophy about how am I going to keep my soil just as healthy and productive as possible, and get as diversified as possible. But you've got to be able to sell it too. And if you'll just talk and network and get ideas and be daring, you know, go ahead. You know, it's okay to try something new. Don't bet the whole farm on it, though. You know, try something. And you're going to find things that, one thing too, I think is most imperative is I see some of the farmers that I've grown up and known all my life that have gone through the 80s crisis and bought land at $3,000 an acre and paid 18% interest, and y'all know what happened to them. Those that are still hanging on have lost their passion. They're strictly a mechanical method of keeping the banker at bay, and it's a mechanized motion now. And organic producers have a passion and your passion just grows and grows. I look so forward to get into those fields and look and smell and feel everything. And so if there's anything I can urge you to do, you've got to find, if it doesn't have a passion to you, you need to go find something else to do, because that's going to be the driving force that carries you through. Now, a couple of things that I'd like to talk briefly about that are happening on a national basis that I think are very important. One thing that we run into, and that it happens with the farmers, the converters, the mills, the manufacturers, is everybody says, well, we're not accustomed to doing things this way. You know, when you talk about selling it and you're talking about processing it, this is just not the old hat. Well, folks, times are changing, and we all are going to have to make an effort to work together. And this is something that farmers and manufacturers and the other people, components in this, have had a difficult time doing in the past. And I think now it's time that we have an opportunity that's restructuring the course of history. This is not a trend, and it's not a fad. And as pioneers, as leaders, it's our responsibility to make this thing work. And if we do not do this as a team effort, and I can't stress that any harder than a team effort in this involvement, you know, it might not be as successful as it can be, and the potential is wonderful. So it's important that whoever you are in this industry, we've got to work together. We all have something to share with each other in every arena. No one's on his own island in this, and it's imperative that if you've got something that you think is going to help somebody, share it. As we speak, we have a cooperative being formed. It's going to be based in Texas, and it's called American Natural Fibers. And this is a direction that I see that farmers have been needing to do for a while. And I know all of you are going, okay, another cooperative. But this is going to be a farmer-owned and driven cooperative. 51% ownership will be farmers. It will be a national effort. It will be a collective way for us to offer to vendors warehoused cotton to get their specific needs, their grades, their types. It'll be a way of tracking cotton. Probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks, each one of you will receive some information about the cooperative, and we'd like some feedback. It is in the developing stages, and the real punchline to this is it's not just a normal cooperative. This will be taking raw cotton and going value added with it. And farmers will have the opportunity to not only get the premium for their cotton, but they can share in the profits of value added from the yarn to the fabric to apparel and all of those processes in between. And I think it's a very, very unique and wonderful opportunity that's out there. I think before our sessions are over tomorrow, I think that, you know, we've got some areas that have to be really discussed, and that's getting some stability in the marketplace and prices for cotton producers. We have a responsibility to, you know, get an effort here as to what our cotton's worth. And I feel like I constantly have to defend myself when I'm speaking to somebody else other than a farmer, because everybody's got their nickels to make in this. But please, farmers have been sacrificing for a long time nickels and dimes. And I believe that there's room in all the other segments of the industry that we can make this thing work without coming out of the farmers' pockets. And as a farmer, I would like to see us have a united effort to keep our prices stable, our prices up and realistic, and produce a quality cotton that all of the processors can provide to the consumers. Finally, I think too, those of you that, you understand that the National Organic Standards Board is diligently doing their job. There has been enough funds allocated for 2 more sessions for public hearings. We thought that the September meeting in Brinkley, Arkansas was going to be the final one, but I understand that there will be a meeting in Texas and there will be a meeting in California, and if we're lucky, there may be some additional meetings before the standard becomes in place. All of you that are in the organic industry, you must participate. You must go to these meetings. It's like voting. If you don't vote, you don't get to complain. If you go and you express your concerns, the rules and regulations that come out of these national standards are going to impact each and every one of us. And you do have an opportunity to make a difference because these hearings are set up for public input. And you have a chance to make a difference. So I urge you to get in touch with your local organic people and find out the dates of the meetings and attend. The more numbers, the more voices that are heard, the better chance we have of having a real good set of standards come out of this, something that we can all live with and be happy with and hopefully go to the bank with when it's all over with. So I'm sure that I have not taken the opportunity to thank all the other different people that I've met in this movement. I try to give you a big hug or a smile or something when I see you, but those of you I haven't talked to in a while or haven't seen, farmers, other people, I appreciate your help. Without you for moral support and some direction, there's lots of times we'd like to give up. And thanks.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, all other participants. At this point, we would like to perhaps move into the open mic session. I see there are mics at each end of the hall here. And while perhaps you're getting your questions together and stuff, I'd just perhaps like to make an observation, sort of a summary of what I've seen thus far and the common thread in some of this. And one of the key elements I see here is the organic cotton farmer recognizes the real importance of improved management. That is, understanding his production system and his land and the interactions there much more closely, which involves, I think it was Bob who told me earlier, involves a casting your shadow more frequently. And somebody else used the term, it's engaging. It's engagement of you and your occupation, so to speak, which is a little bit more, which is somewhat different than perhaps we've seen in the past. But that was a common thread I heard through here is the passion, the engagement, the checking your fields more than once a week, etc. As a result of that is you have to stay ahead of the curve, and you can't wait to, you don't have quite the opportunities to correct crises as you would under conventional. With that, I'm going to request questions to any of the speakers here that you've heard today. If you please use the mic so everyone can hear.
Mr. Wiseman spoke this morning, and he mentioned cottonseed, but neither he nor anyone else has mentioned that cottonseed is delicious added to foods. You mentioned cottonseed oil, but the cottonseed meal itself is very, very good. So I wondered why nobody has gone into that field. I'd like to buy some if I could get organic cottonseed meal. Nobody in it?
There is some glandless cottonseed.
Some what?
Glandless, it's without gossypol. That means it doesn't need to be.
I understand, yes.
So forth. I've got a half a circle in the organic organic program this year, glandless cottonseed.
You will have it for sale?
Well, the guy raising it for will have it for sale. His last name is Rogers. He's building a plant right now around Lubbock, Texas, to make organic cottonseed meal flour. Well, not really organic. It's not as focused. Not probably the only organic grower that I know of right offhand. But the seed will be grown for human consumption in several different ways, either as a nut in candy or meal or so forth and so on.
I have another question. I'm wondering why people, Ms. McMahon decried it, but almost everybody is still talking about soil tests, which are based on chemical fertilizers. It's, to me, hypocritical to be an organic grower or even think and talk about organics, at the same time to talk about soil tests and tissue tests, all of which are based on cations. All the theories concerning cation absorption are totally false, because plants, we now know, recent information, will absorb exactly the same as human and animal tissue. And no vet or doctor talks to you about how many potassium ions you need. He talks in terms of molecules. Plants absorb whole molecules or clusters of molecules, that absorb even plastic beads, which have nothing to do with the plus and minus situation. And we know that there's no size limit practically because even bacteria, entire bacteria, which are millions of times bigger than any ion or any molecule, can also be absorbed, as we all know, in cover crop work with legumes. So why are organic people still talking in terms of cations? Please?
Somebody want to take that? Good question. I don't know much about soil samples. I know the reason that we do the sampling on our farm is because we want to see what nutrients that is missing in soil. And not so we can put commercial fertilizers in it, but so that we can give it natural fertilizers.
Yeah, but one of the best ways to know what's wrong with the soil is to look at the weeds. Each weed will tell you why it grows in that particular place. You need to know that.
Well, see, we try to keep the weeds from growing.
We don't see that weeds are valuable.
Question here?
Okay, my question is for the shepherds, and I asked you guys this briefly at lunch, but I wasn't taking notes at the time, so I'm going to take for the record. What do you guys do to prepare your crops for harvest? Now, I know that you can't use defoliant, and obviously we don't have really early frost here, so how do you go about getting the crops ready for harvest, and then how do you harvest them?
On defoliation, the only way that we have for defoliation is you take petal samples and the soil samples, and the crop itself will show you what it's deficiency in, and a lot of times the stuff that it's deficiency in will finish the crop out for you. But as far as defoliating it, it will not defoliate it. If my wife hadn't turned her slides upside down, we could show you our cotton when it was picked. The leaves was there, they were green. It's just that we have nothing to kill the plant, and until someone comes up with something that says if you can defoliate this plant, we're not going to be able to. They want this plant picked and harvested without defoliation on it. For a simple reason is there are people out there that are sensitive to defoliations, and if it's in the cotton, you're going to have it put into your bedding. Whatever a lot of people like to buy mattresses with organic cotton in, and that way they don't have headaches, they say, and they don't have any irritations from it. So it's definitely going to have to be something that is an organic method of defoliation. And the defoliation as we have right now, there's no defoliants out there that we can use because of that purpose. It's not classified as organic cotton if you defoliate it. I mean, you've got a residue on it of some type that would be there. So you have to hunt for something that's in that plant that needs a finishing out. I mean, you have to finish this plant out. Once this plant is finished out, then it does open. So you have to find what that plant is short in, and you feed that plant. And then that plant will shut itself down, and then it'll open when it's time. That's all I have to say about that part of it.
Well, if you would use a very strong solution of liquid seaweed, the hormone concentration that will be sufficient to stop growth.
But you're adding a lot of salt to your
No, you're not adding a lot of salt. No, that's wrong. You don't worry about the salt in your blood. You shouldn't worry about it in the seaweed.
I mean, it may be all possible, but a lot of this stuff that people present that you want to use is governed by CCOF.
CCOF will certify it, and it's cheap.
Well, if someone can get a solution out of it, I'm sure there's a
We're
lot
willing
of
to try it.
people that would try it. But as far as to go out there and put it on the whole field at one time, I don't know too many people that are interested in
Just
doing it.
easy. And it's cheap.
But, you know, there's a lot of people that were willing to try a lot of different things, bar defoliation. I see no problem in trying a lot of different things. Always make sure that it's CCOF approved if you're in that organization. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sell your product.
That's right.
Because your buyers that buy this cotton do not want anything on it that is not accepted by the public. That's the main thing. Don't go out regulations to get your experiments done. Make sure that you're well within your rights before you experiment with anything.
Everybody's certified.
Same harvest equipment that anybody else has, right?
Yeah, you can use the same equipment for harvesting your equipment. I mean, to harvest your crop with. The only thing is, from what I understand, there's no regulations on what type riggers you use or anything like that. The only thing is, when you send it to a gin, they want the gin cleaned out. They don't want any cotton that contaminate this cotton that would cause a residue of some type in your cotton.
But the leaves and stuff that are left over, nothing fully,
The leaves that are left over in your cotton, you are going to have green stains that conventional growers don't have. You are going to have some stains. I mean, let's get real with this thing, you know. I mean, we're picking cotton that is not defoliated. So yes, we're going to have stains in our cotton that we wouldn't have normally. We're going to have more leaves in our cotton than we wouldn't have normally. You're also going to have green bolls in the cotton itself. Last year I was real shocked when we went to the gin and we saw that all the green bolls that was coming out of this cotton, I couldn't believe it. And there was, you know, those bolls that you're not going to be able to add as your harvest. I mean, it was just thrown out.
I'd like to say one thing too about that. The only way that we could gin last year and actually got our cotton out is the gin that we were doing business with cleaned the gin, and we were the first ones to gin. They gin the organic first, and then they went into conventional. And if we had not had that opportunity, I think it would have been real difficult to gin our cotton, especially. I mean, we put it into modules, but the green matter that was in there, we're afraid it was going to start to compost, and so it had to be ginned right away. And without that benefit, I think we'd been in a lot of trouble.
That's a very good point. Bob?
I have sort of a multifold question. I'd like to know from all the growers what their favorite cover crops are going into cotton, or preceding cotton, that is. Also, whether Lorna has experience using big flower vetch, whether any of you has experience using reduced tillage, and what role you see earthworms having in your production systems.
Well, I'll speak first. We are involved in several on-farm research projects at this time. We're doing a no-till cotton demonstration with USDA. We did planting of rye and vetch and straight rye and mowed and planted into the residue. I was kind of skeptical of rye until last year, and I won't farm again without it. It was a remarkable crop as far as the lithopathic qualities that it has for my food. I love that. It's just nice to work with.
Including big flower vetch, have you played around with that yet?
We've got a small amount we're going to plant this year. We're going to try out 3 or 4 different varieties of that we got from the Rodale Institute, and look forward to it because it has lots of possibilities. We also do crimson clover, and we use those crops, but we also use buckwheat.
I'd like to say that lot of marketing for other crops that you're trying to grow on organic ground. I mean, this year we grew some oats and we grew wheat, and there wasn't a market for organic oats or organic wheat. Not at least we couldn't find one. And I think that's one of the major problems that we really need to work on is a lot more rotation. In the past, we've used alfalfa as a rotation crop, and it seems to work really well. But I just think that, you know, there's a lot of things that, a lot of research that needs to be done and a lot of marketing. We need to reach out and try to find these other markets. I'm sure they're here somewhere, but we just have not been able to really get with them. So we're hoping that, you know, in the near future, that we can use a lot of rotation and we can also find some markets for them.
At Taylor Farms, we've used the oats and alfalfa as rotational crops. Earthworms, were non-existent until we started the organic program. Since then, we've experienced earthworms, and I know that helps the friability, our water retention. We get numerous side benefits from the earthworms. As far as minimum tillage, we try to do our heavy tillage prior to our cover crop, and then try to do minimum tillage and try to leave the cover crop residue incorporated in the top of the soil, so that it winds up being back in the cotton bed itself.
I guess black eyed peas is one of the better rotations I've seen in our area for cotton organic or inoculated black eyed peas.
Other questions for the panel? You don't mind using the speaker, Harvey?
In general, what have the cotton grades been in the experience you've had in harvesting the cotton in the way that you have to because it's organic?
Well, we harvested 660 acres last year, and we had an average of about 2.2, 2.3 or 4, and 67% of those were inland. So we felt like we did pretty good. And that was, of course, our first endeavor.
Our upland grades have been 41s or better, and in our PIMO, our organic PIMO is actually, our grades have been better because we've had a shorter and more compact stalk, and we've had less bark reduction in our PIMO grades.
I believe our grade or colors improved due to, just like you said, our stalk's more compact. Don't have quite as much leaf matter in the micro.
What have you been planting on? 30s, 38s, 40s, and has it affected the cotton in any way? Also, this CCF listing, is that right? CCOF. Where do you obtain one?
We started out on 36-inch rows and found that it was they were too wide, that we had too many weed problems, and we converted our entire operation over to 30-inch rows, and we found out we've got a lot better control. We do have one farmer that's in our program that's on the 15-inch rows, and it'll be interesting to see. We did a small amount to see. He did a lot of soybeans on 15-inch and organic soybeans. So, but the 30s, the difference between 36 and 30-inch really made a big difference for us.
I'm on 48-inch rows, and I'm kind of the opposite, I guess. The shorter the rows, I had more weed problems, especially with perennials, with the larger, and we have a water problem, but with the larger beds and wider beds, I could cultivate the perennials out, and virtually I've eliminated the purple nightshade and Johnson grass from my fields with the larger beds, being able to widen large areas of.
We grow all our crops on 38s or 40s depending on the area we're in, but we find out that the more aeration we give it, we have a humidity problem in the summertime in Arizona, and we're trying to reduce the aflatoxin so we don't have the fungus problem with bull rot. We make one of the roads.
First First of all, this gentleman said something about being sure something is CCOF okayed. There is no place in the world that anyone would have any objection to use the seaweed. It's the single best soil application you can make. It's been known for thousands of years, and there isn't any certification group that would dare to say anything against it because it's so well known as the best you can use. There's nothing you could do better for your cotton growing or any other crop than to use seaweed. And there's never any problem about certification. But I wanted to ask, is there anybody in this group that values weeds for what they do? Am I the only person around here to talk about weed value?
Over the last few years, as I have met other farmers and they talked about their weed problems, one thing that I have learned on our farm, that certain weeds that show up have shown my calcium problems, where it was low in calcium.
That's right.
And they have become, my neighbors get kind of nervous seeing my weeds, but my weeds are showing me the change in my soil.
That's right. Most of them are accumulator plants. Some of them are only indicator, but most of them are accumulator plants. And I put in 7 pages on that because I think it's so important. And I'm just disappointed I can't get an answer from anybody in this group about the use of weeds. I've waited all day and haven't heard anything. Weeds are very valuable, not only because they have deep roots that bring up minerals from way below, but they're indications of water need and so. Yeah.
One thing, not so much as keeping the weeds, but seeing the allelopathic qualities of this rye. I have serious pigweed problems and Johnson grass problems, and I had an experiment on 55 acres where I planted 25-foot strips and 25 rye and skipped, and I had bean stubble. And in the strips that I had rye and planted into that, I virtually had no weeds. And I had an abundance in the bean stubble of not only pigweed and Johnson grass, but cucumber. So it looked like somebody had made a strip across the field and gave me some indications that I have some underlying problems that I need to look at. Calcium is going to be one that we really look at.
Well, it seems to me that the universities are finally coming around to vindicating Albrecht, who they kicked out 50 years ago because he said that calcium was so important. Now they're having whole books on calcium value. And another point was, you speak of allelopathy with rye, but there are many weeds also that show that. So you get a value from them alone. I mean, weeds can be very valuable, and it's disappointing me that I can't. You're the only person. Then is anybody else?
We're also doing an on-farm research project this year with Rodale with radishes for allelopathic qualities in Johnson grass. So if it works, maybe we can all plant radishes to see what happens.
Well, I've written pages and pages on it. I was hoping to be of some use to somebody, and apparently nobody is interested.
As far as weeds and helping in other areas, weeds really help with your biological controls. On all of our fence rows in our fields, we don't control them, we let them grow. The reason is your beneficial bugs seem like they work a lot better in those fields where you allow your fence rows to grow up. I know that the fence rows in the areas where I'm at, don't allow them to grow up. We have early bugs that come in that even before we're putting bugs out, we're getting bugs just from nature itself because of these bar ditches, fence rows that we allow to grow up. So weed is a big beneficial in a lot of things. I know that it really helps us with the bug situation. I know that predators stay there better. They don't leave as easy. They're there, they overwinter there, and they're ready for a work break the following year.
Anybody else?
The question over here.
Yeah, I was wondering when you were saying that, especially Claude, when you harvested the cotton and you were the first ones with the tube, and that's why you didn't have a real bad problem with the use of composting and the green stain. But if you have a bunch of people lining up at the gym with the same situation, what are you going to do?
We're really hoping that we can get a designated organic gin where we can pick in rotations. And if we can do that, then as far as I can see, it's going to be just smooth sailing. I mean, that's what we're really going to have to have. We're going to have a gin that they don't have to shut down and clean out. It's just straight organic. And if we can do that and we can pick in a rotation,
then I think we'll be fine.
Got a few more minutes. Any more comments?
I have no questions. I just came here, I was asked to come here to say a few words. 3 years ago, based on Florida having the groundwater pollution with the herbicides, the University of Florida and our company decided to develop a way of killing weeds with hot water. We brought that last fall to Fresno State University, and the university there did some defoliation work with cotton. And we learned that you can defoliate cotton or dehydrate cotton, but the leaves wouldn't fall off. So we went back to the drawing board and we had just developed a new technology that by varying the temperature, we can kill the leaves and then with time they'll fall off. So in 1994, we expect to have several of the units on demonstration. First to burn down the weeds in row. We can do it right now on vegetables for cheaper than herbs and chemicals. In corn, it costs $15 to control the weeds. We can do it for $15, which includes the depletion of the machine and the diesel used to heat the water. Now we haven't costed out the defoliation part because it's a different problem. The problem is you want to do it fast, so you can defoliate thousands of acres. Our machine works slow because it goes at 4 miles an hour. But anyway, these are some of the technologies that are coming that may be of use to you.
Just with regard to the weed comments, turkey mullein right now is in flower along the roadsides and the fence rows in this county and other adjoining counties. And you can see a lot of beneficials using that one right now, tachinid flies and various parasitic and predatory wasps as well. And some pests use the same resources, so you have to, how the balance works out is not always that clear from initial inspection, but there's a lot of relationships out there that weeds have that we can potentially turn to advantage.
Lady with a big mouth. One of the speakers mentioned, wait a minute, about insects. I don't know, it's just odors they respond to. So insects do not respond just to odors. They respond to the frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum. That's what makes the difference, because insects will act the same way an airplane pilot will, looking for directions from the tower. That's the real basis for the insect attack on plants. They sense something, and it's frequencies that they sense because the plant is not in good shape.
Well, I think we better close it down now. We've got a break coming up here. We're supposed to shut this down about 3:30. That's pretty close. I appreciate everyone coming in here. Look forward to the next set of sessions. Thank you.